Ages ago, I made a second selection video talking about who played with who, and one of my most requested comments is to give an update on the video. Since then, we've had episode Nagi explore some things, including Hiragi unexpectedly being the one to team up with Nico and Sentetsu instead of Hiyori like I predicted, and even the fourth match having Karasu and Otoya, who played on Kyora's team, which felt a bit like a retcon because of the interactions with Chigiri, but that's beside the point. So we've gathered enough information for me to revisit this idea, and I also want to make the video before Rio's 3v3 in the case I'm right and I can get bragging rights. For those who don't remember, what we know is that there are 125 people who survived the first election and made it to this point, and the rules are currently simple. If you win, you steal a player until you have 5 players, where you face the World 5 team, and if you lose in the 2v2 and you don't get selected, you get eliminated. Now I quickly want to address some concerns with the second selection, mainly because I've seen people say that it doesn't make much sense, because if you do the math then more than 7 teams should survive, i.e. around 18 or 19. But I think a lot of the issues can be solved if you realize the World 5 was the final test in this selection, and so the 5 Blue Lockers had to show some spark of ego and skill to survive. There's surely more than 7 teams that attempted the trial, as realistically it's not that hard to do. It's just 2 wins to get there, but if they showed nothing special, then the World 5 could just write them off and basically eliminate them. Even if there's a time limit, I just don't see that many fodder teams stand idle for 2 weeks and not even attempt a 4v4 by the time the 7th clear finished. That being said, let's jump straight into the teams and the known timeline of all the matches. Right off the bat and straight after completing the 100 goal test, we have the first match, with the top 3 facing against Isugi, Nagi and Bachara, where Bachara gets picked up and having Isugi and Nagi drop down to the 2v2. And around the same time we had Barou, Narahaya and Nishioka lose to a mystery team of 3. As we know, the players must wait a complete 24 hours before the next match. And so on the second day we have Barou, Narahaya against Isugi and Nagi, with the end result of Narahaya getting eliminated and the trio moving up to the main stage again. We have in the first 2 days Chigiri, Kunigami and Rio train together. We have Isugi, Nagi and Barou challenge them on the 3rd day, picking up Chigiri and sending Kunigami and Rio to the losers gate. Later on the 3rd day we had 2 things, firstly being Isugi offered the rematch Rin, and secondly Kunigami and Shido start beefing, which means they lost their 3v3 in one of the first 3 days. So on the 4th day we have the rematch against Rin's team, with Isugi losing once again, but getting picked up. And on this day I also believe Kunigami had a good chance to get eliminated. Now the new thing we learned is from episode Nagi's journey, and we know that on the 5th day that Sentetsu, Nico and Hiragi played their 3v3, meaning they trained for 4 days before their first match, which kinda makes sense since they had 0 synergy. After defeating Hiragi's team they end up picking Sentetsu, and their next match is against Kyora's team, where as we know he will get picked up, with Karasu, Otoya and Himizu dropping down. So assuming there's no downtime, then Nagi's team will end up being the second clear team on the 6th day. And so it's almost been a complete week and yet only 2 teams have survived. Even with all these known matches, we still have an unknown journey for all the other players up until this point. And going forward, I may use a term called a fodder character, which is basically just a character that exists to be a placeholder for any character like a random Team V character or an unnamed character introduced in the second selection, like for example a top 15 player. So the first unknown match I want to discuss is the second match in this arc, and that's the Barou, Narahaya and Nishioka 3v3 against the mystery team. And so the question is, who was on this team to defeat Barou's trio? And I have 2 thoughts. My first thought is they have to be a trio strong enough to beat both survivors, Barou and Nishioka. Even if Barou was not a team player, his individual skill would be enough to crush any weaklings, like a team consisting of someone like Kuon, Imamaru or Iomon. And so I believe there's an extremely good chance that they weren't random fodder characters, but consisted of a team of known survivors. My second thought is the fact Barou's team got sent down so quick, and the fact that both Kunigami and Chigiri highlighted how they didn't see anyone they know, including Narahaya, that I believe there's a good chance they played against another trio with numbers below Chigiri's 44. And since we know it can't be people like Rin, Hiragi, Kyora, Otoya, etc., that leaves us with a handful of characters it could be. Another thing to consider is that when Chigiri and Kunigami are talking, we see some of the other survivors like Corona, Tanaka and Ishikari, and so I think there's a low chance it would involve them. And so the survivors within this range include Haiji, Sakura, Yukimiya, and Hiyori. Before jumping into my actual guess of the trio, I do want to mention that Nishioka is currently in a team of 4, and so hypothetically if he played with his current team against the 5th clear team, then that would mean that they were all fodders or involved with players from the 6th or 7th clear teams. But to who I actually think the trio is? Well, I think there are 2 potential options and both involve Yukimiya, as I'm predicting he loses against Karasu's 4v4 team later on. And so my first prediction is that the trio involves Haiji, Sakura, and Yukimiya. As we know, Yukimiya was as good as Barou if not better, and with Haiji and Sakura it's believable this trio could defeat Barou's trio, especially in a close 5-4 score. And a quick side note, since Haiji and Sakura are both likely Team Y players, I'm guessing they were teammates previously too. If you remember my old prediction, I guess that it would involve Kira, Haiji and Sakura, but my updated prediction is it involves Yukimiya instead of Kira. Now there are 2 main reasons why I think this was the trio. As we know, Yukimiya hasn't joined Otoya and Karasu yet, and so Yuki must lose that match to get picked up, and so picking up Nishioka now means that the 4 of them can battle against Karasu, Otoya, Himizu and Yuzu, and this means that Nishioka can be defeated and drop down, while Yukimiya gets picked up for the 3rd clear team. I do want to mention, there's a chance we also see Ryo's journey in episode Naki, and so he will have 2 matches, the one against Sakura and the one against Corona. And since they were the 7th clear team, it means no other survivor could be in the 4v4 besides either Sakura or Corona. However, the 3v3 isn't off limits to who is involved. Personally, saving Corona for the final game is more hype than if they use Sakura, so I think he will be used in the 3v3 like Hirogi was, and Corona the final boss, with his teammates including fodders like the rank 6. And so if Yukimiya was on a team with Sakura, and was picked up in the 4v4, then we can have Sakura's team of 3 including Nishioka and Haiji be the ones to drop down and play against Ryo in his next 3v3. Now there's a big reason I think they were involved in Barou's 3v3 and will face against Ryo in the next 3v3, and that's because of their salaries in the NEL, which sounds weird but hear me out. If you look at the 3rd and 4th round offers and focus on the characters who hadn't been introduced yet, you had Hirogi who was involved in the 3v3 against Naki, and the next one is Himizu who had appeared in the 4v4. And if you look at the other offers, you realize there are 2 other blue lockers yet to be introduced who got offers, and they are Nishioka and Haiji, both on this team I'm predicting. But it's not just that. In my last video it was about Naki and why he'll reawaken in the Barca match, and one of my points I mentioned was the characters involved in the match, as I think everyone in this match directly influenced the development of either Ryo or Nagi in the 2nd or 3rd selection. And since all 3 of these players are involved in the Manshine vs Barca match, then having them in the 3v3 with the Ryo's development makes sense. But that's only my first option. There's a second one I think it could also be, and that is if Yukimiya, Hiro and Ishikari were on the same team. I know we saw Ishikari in the waiting room, but seeing as I don't think the author planned the 2nd selection thoroughly, as seen by Nagi's 4v4, I won't write Ishikari off as a member. And this trio is extremely strong and even better than the last one, which makes it believable they can beat Barou's team. But maybe they are a bit too strong and would win in a harder stomp than a 5-4 score. Now the basis of this trio is they set up the foundation of the 5th clear team. If they pick up Nishioka, then we can have Yukimiya, Hiro and Ishikari against Karasu, Otoya, Himizu and Yuzu, where their match can be prompted between Karasu and Hiyori's relationship. And as they lose, instead of picking up Hiyori, Karasu picks Yukimiya, as he probably didn't see Hiyori's spark yet, where Yukimiya showed something more. These 2 teams are powerhouses and have such strong players that they can push each other to evolve more, and it can be a reason they placed above Nagi in the 3rd selection, even though Nagi beat them. And so with Ishikari, Nishioka and Hiyori dropping down, we have 3 core members of the 5th clear team, and then they can pick up Nico or Saramadara later. But one thing to note is the fact Hirogi placed in the 4th team, while Nico 5th, implying they must lose again, likely against the 4th clear team. And a potential issue is the fact these teams consist of Nanase and Hiyori, who do not know each other prior to the 3rd selection. And so Nico has to lose twice, the first time getting rid of Hiroki, and the 2nd time in order to get picked up by Hiyori's team. As for the other matches, we know that Ikiguri and Shido lost in one of the first few days, since Shido got a red card because he was bored. So I'm guessing the 4 other players involved in the match were all boring fodder characters, basically the scraps and likely high number players too. We also know on day 1 that there were about 4 or so other teams in the lower bracket, implying a handful of teams played on the first day. And we also know some other teams like rank 74 and 92 playing together, and rank 93 and rank 106. We also see rank 67 and 83 lying on the ground, implying 2 more teams were in the 2v2. Although they don't have definitive ranks yet, we know that the duo in the top 15 made it to the 4v4 stage, and some other characters like Yuzu's brother and the top 15 glasses guy also formed a team. But no one really cares about these guys, so I mainly ignore them. They're basically fodders. Another question we have is which of the 4 in Kyora's team lost in the 3v3? The fact Himizu, Otoy and Karasu bully Kyora and call him weak makes me lean towards Kyora being the one to lose their match. We do see someone with a rank 31 jersey in the same screen as rank 21, which is Kyora's jersey, although that character doesn't really look like him. But if you do need a fodder character, then he's sufficient. But honestly, there's no key indication if he had any non-fodder teammates. But it does open an opportunity for another survivor to be in a 2v2 situation if they ought to get picked up later. For example, it could be someone like Saramadara, where he could drop down and win the 2v2 with rank 31, proceed to lose against Hiroki and Nico, and get picked up for the 5th clear team. As for the 3rd clear team, we know they lose against Nagi and get sent down, and so they are required to play 2 more games to pick up Yuzu and Yukimiya. As I mentioned earlier, I believe that Yukimiya was in a team with Sakura, Haiji and Nishioka, and that 4v4 involved both parties. As for the 3v3, I'm guessing they were all weak and fodder, as Yuzu was the one to get picked up. But you could actually have something like Yuzu, Nanase and Sunzaki, ranks 98, 99 and 100, as a trio. That way they maintain the first team being second, second being third, and third being fourth. And in this scenario, you could have Endoji being Akira's ex-teammate and sent down to the 2v2, for him to get picked up by Sunzaki and Nanase later. But that's just a hypothetical, and I think it's more likely Yuzu's teammates are just complete fodders. I also saw another screen with rank 115 playing with 77, Himizu's number implying they participated in a game, so 115 being Yuzu's teammate is a possibility too. As for the 4th clear team, they are a complete wildcard. I've always been a firm believer that Nanase, Endoji and Sunzaki were teammates in the first selection, and so they teamed up. But my biggest issue with this trio is the fact they must have waited like a full week before playing their first 3v3, as Hiroki and Haiji would only be available approximately a week in. So if the Yuzu thing didn't happen, then their journey is so incredibly boring. So I want to propose that Nanase's team were the ones to play against Kuon's. I have 2 reasons for that. Firstly, Nanase, Sunzaki and Doji resemble Iesuki, Raiji and Kunigami, the 3 biggest interactions with Kuon. And so I think they will mirror how they play and the aura will resonate with them and prompt their match. The other reason is both teams have high numbers in a similar range, and although that doesn't mean much, it could mean there's only a few options to play against. And as Nanase's trio win, they pick up Kuon as their 4th member, and I'd like if rumours spread around about Kuon's shenanigans in the first selection. And so a bunch of teams actually offer to play their 4v4, hoping Kuon will snake them and play 3v5. But since he's a changed man, he turns down those advances. Since Nanase's trio is on the weaker side, as none made the U20 bench and struggling in the NEL, I think they are pretty weak. And so the interesting thing I want to happen is if they lose against a team of mid-tier players, where they pick up Kuon as their 5th member. And so the Nanase trio drop back down to the 3v3. Don't forget what I said earlier though, even though Kuon made it in a team of 5, I believe no one on his team, including him, truly awakened or sparked anything interesting for the World 5 members, and so they failed to pass even with 5 players. That way it's karma for Kuon as he didn't overcome despair or adversity like his teammates in the first selection. And even though he changed his ways, he halted his development too much and still ended up getting eliminated. And so they're sent back down to the 3v3. And so for the rest of the 4th and clear teams, it's a bit more awkward to figure out, as I think it depends on who actually beat Barou's team originally. If it was Yukimiya, Hiri and Ishikari, then I believe it was the path when Nishioka gets picked up, loses Yukimiya to Karasu's team, and then they have to pick up Nico and Saramadara. Where the 4th clear's journey could just be a simple Nanase trio beating Haiji's team of complete fodders. Then those 4 beat Nico, Hiroki and their 2 fodders, picking up Hiroki. We do see a pattern with number 22 and 62 playing together, so he could be one of the fodder players. And as Nico drops down to the 3v3, he could face against Hiyori, Nishioka and Ishikari, where they lose and Nico gets picked up. Then finally they beat Saramadara, who most likely had fodders on his team too, although it could be the 6th clear team members too, that is Raiji, Gagamaru and Wanama. And this way Nico can get a proper win as he lost like 3 or 4 times, and we don't have Hiyori and Narase meet yet. However, if the other option where Sakura, Haiji and Nishioka were on the same team, then that would mean that Haiji and Nishioka would be sent down to the losers game, requiring them to win at least one more game. Similarly, we know Hiroki dropped down to the 2v2 with Nico, meaning they must have won a 2v2 and picked someone up. I'm fairly certain it's a fodder character like rank 62 I mentioned earlier. Both duos have a hybrid of a 4th and 5th clear member, sent to the losers gate, where they must win to get a 3rd member. And so if Haiji is part of Sakura's team, then the 4th clear team will take quite some time to complete, but both should contain fodder characters. Then for the 6th clear team, it's hard to tell their journey. Like we know the original trio is Raiji, Gagamaru and Wanama, but then they finished with a full team and placed 6th. And so adding Tsuguma and Tanaka makes their journey just sound incredibly short, as it's just adding 2 players, but still taking 2 weeks to complete, which is a bit weird unless they tried polishing and training for a long time. To spice things up, you could have them beat Ishikari or Saramadara, and then lose him to the 5th clear team in the 4v4, and then have them play to pick up Tsuguma and Tanaka later. Another fun thing that could happen is instead of Nanase's team beating Kuon's, we could have Raiji beating them. And so a potential option is having Tsuguma beat Kuon's team and pick him up, and then in the 4v4 have Raichi's team defeat him. And this is simply because Kuon had direct relationships with Wanama and Raichi in the first selection, and can make their journey significantly more interesting. Then for the 7th clear team I've discussed before, there's a chance it's Haiji and Nishioka, but the only guarantee is that whoever is in the 4v4 has fodder teammates. But in the chance it wasn't Haiji or Nishioka and Sakura's team, and then it was actually the route where Hiyori, Yukimiya and Ishikari were teammates, then I just think Sakura's teammates would just be complete fodders. Especially since a lot of the known characters in the 1st, 2nd or even 3rd clear teams would have finished by now, and so there's only a small subset of known characters available. Now that we know everyone's proposed journey, I can give an actual estimate timeline for both routes. In the case that Yukimiya is with Haiji and Sakura to begin with, then we have this journey where the remnants of the team will play against Ryo soon, and eventually will look something like this. Alternatively, if Yukimiya is with Hiyori and Ishikari, then I propose a timeline similar to this, where it bases on Nico's journey. In general, either one could happen, however both based off the fact Yukimiya is the one to beat Barou in the 2nd selection. There will definitely be errors in the video and potential changes depending on what else is shown in episode Nagi, but for now this is what I think. Now before concluding the video, I do want to further talk about the timeline. If you notice the days, then you'll realize the 2nd selection would last around 3 weeks, which is a lot of time. However, I do want to point out that this timeline actually fits. If we look at the NEL, we know there are 100 days until the U20 World Cup, and before that we know the Blue Lockers have 2 weeks off after the U20 game, which places the actual game at the end of January. We also know the 3rd selection and training started when there are 30 days until this match, placing it at the end of December. From what I've read, the Saitama match and Blue Lock roughly started around November 18. And if the 1st selection was about a week long and they had 10 days training afterwards, that would mean the 2nd selection would start early December. So this timeline for the 2nd selection, which can span around 3 weeks, can actually happen with no issues. And with that being said, let me know who you think beat Barou in the 2nd selection, which matches you predict, and as always, Buddha be praised, take care and have a good day.